Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMS Cast. I'm joined by a special guest. His name is Jeff Chandler. I've known Jeff from around the WordPress community, Twitter, being online. We've met at WordCamps before, and I wanted to have a conversation with Jeff about writing, building community, using WordPress. But first, welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And you can find Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Rowe. The O is a 0. I love watching your tweets. I'm a foodie. I used to take more pictures of food, but I always like seeing my friends that have food interests, like posting stuff. Where did that come from you? It seems like there's a community of people that are really like kind of knit about that.
Yeah. So the last time I checked, I have over 11,000 photos on my iPhone. And if 80% of those are pictures of food, it would not surprise me. But I don't know. I just got into the habit. There's food is really, it's like a connector, and it could, there's a sense of community around food, but man, it's interesting when you have a meal and that meal just takes you to a different place. Like, wow, I didn't know food could be this good, or I've never had this kind of experience before. And so a lot of times when I'm taking a photo of food, it's just a way for me to remember it. And actually, it's come in handy a few times. My wife has laughed at me and joked around and said, "Why do you take so many pictures of food?" And then she'll think of a recipe or something that we want to make, and she won't remember exactly what was in it or what it looked like. And I say, "Honey, hold on." So I go back into my phone, I bring up the picture, and I show it to her. She goes, "Oh, you know what? I don't mind you taking photos of our food now." But yeah, taking a picture of a meal. I love good meals, love good food. And it just turns out that I've been doing this for a long time, and now we've sort of found some of my tribe on Twitter, and we have this hashtag called WP Foodies, and we usually send each other photos about what we're having for dinner, or if we come across a nice meal, or whether it's a food truck or something like that. Just a way to share and participate. It's kind of our own little community, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, everybody, I think everybody likes food. Everybody needs food in order to survive. But I just like taking pictures of it and having a sort of a photographic memory of it. And I will tell you, man, the one time we went to this fancy place, and I figured the steak there would be amazing. So I had a steak, and my wife had the scallops. And the scallops that my wife had, the first time I bit into the scallop, I closed my eyes, and it like took me to this. I felt like I was going on a magic carpet ride, and I said, there is no way a scallop should bring me this kind of experience over a steak. And by golly, from there on after, I did not order the steak. I ordered the scallops.
That's awesome. Let's use that as an entry point into community. And particularly with social media, I'm kind of the bent where if you meet me in person, I'm the same person you're going to see online. I have my professional business side, but I'm also a real human with my own interests. We were chatting before the show about hiking, getting out in nature, gardening, running, stuff like that. I like to bring just some of my just casual self to my social media. I've noticed you do too. How do you think about that? Like, is that intentional, or what's your philosophy behind that? What need does that meet for your soul or your spirit? How do you think about social media and being you?
Well, for starters, it's a bit of a bummer that I don't hear a rooster going on. Sometimes when I tuned into this podcast, I would hear a rooster, and it would bring this whole certain farm life dynamic to the show. So I know you're in this nice office now, but I kind of missed the rooster. I thought it was very cool.
Insulated. So you can't hear him.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't recommend moving roosters and a whole bunch of chickens across the state. It's kind of a pain to do that, but we did it successfully.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now you have a joke. Why did the rooster cross the state? Something like that. Yeah, so going back, as far as how I present myself and who I am as a person and on social media, I have never shied away from the fact that I consider myself a WYSIWYG. And for those of you who don't know, that is what you see is what you get. And I have never strayed away from that. The only person I know who to truly be is myself. And so I'm never really encountered any need to be somebody other than myself. So that's who I am. That's who I'm most comfortable of being. And it's worked out. And in an age of social media where people are doing everything they can to please the algorithms and whatnot and try to go viral, I'm just being me. And if I go viral, I'll go viral, but I really don't care. It's just I don't have any interest in being anyone but me. So, but yeah. And I've come across a lot of people these days that appreciate the genuineness and the bluntness and the truthfulness of someone like me. Although I will say, I tell the truth a lot. But if your wife asks, does she look fat in this dress? Trust me, that is an opportunity that you want to not be as truthful as you've always has been, because if you say the wrong thing, it will hurt. Literally. I'm talking from experience here.
Yeah, there's a saying, your vibe attracts your tribe. So if you be yourself and you attract to certain people that are interested in whatever you're into, whether it's WordPress or food or, being a homebody or whatever it is, you want people to become magnetized to the real you, right? That's a lot less work to just be yourself.
Yeah, and then on Twitter, it's a whole thing of, back in the day, at least when I used to produce the WordPress Weekly podcast back when I was still working for WP Tavern, writing for them and publishing articles. At least people could hear my voice, but I haven't been on a podcast and I haven't been really out there as far as my voice is concerned for quite some time, for a number of years. And so I do find it to be kind of a bummer of people reading my tweets and sometimes not being able to hear the genuineness behind the words that I'm saying, or being able to hear that I'm speaking from the heart, or that I really mean what I'm saying. And so that's a bit of a bummer. But by and large, for the most part, everyone that has followed me for a number of years knows that, I'm me, and what I say is what I say, and I'm not going to yank them by the chain. And so I've been able to establish that, hey, what you see is what you get, and that's what you're going to get out of me.
You mentioned writing at the WP Tavern, did you start that site?
Yeah, I founded WP Tavern back in the beginning of 2009, and it was prior to that I had started writing for Mark Ghosh of weblawtoolscollection.com, which at the time was the largest and most popular website devoted to WordPress news. In fact, it was in the WordPress dashboard. That's how popular it was. And Mark, actually, I started a blog and I was writing about publishing articles about things I was learning about WordPress at the time. And Mark happened to come across some of my articles and said, hey, how would you like to get paid to write about this stuff? And I said, wait, is that a thing? Can you get paid to write about WordPress and articles? He said, yeah. I said, absolutely. Let's give it a shot. And then on top of that, I'm writing and publishing articles on the site that's in the WordPress dashboard, meaning anything I publish shows up in the dashboards of WordPress users all over the world. Woo, let's go. I'm not going to say no to that. So I started doing that for a little while. And a lot of my articles generated a number of comments. So I started creating a sort of community around the things that I was writing. I did that for about a year or so and created a following. And there was a domain that came up called WP Tavern. It was actually a gentleman by the name of Kyle Easlick. He was running a website called WP Hacks, and a lot of OG WordPress people might remember that domain name, where he was publishing things, code snippets and things of that nature for WordPress. And he said, hey, I have this domain available. You like to use it? And I said, well, I don't know what I would use it for or whatnot. So I made a blog post and I reached out to my community and I said, hey, there's this there's this domain available. Should I break off from oneblogtoolscollection.com and do something on my own? And what do you guys think? And everybody who chimed in said, yes, do it. Have a forum, do whatever you want. We'll follow you. So I'm like, okay. So Kyle graciously donated the domain of WP Tavern to me. And it turns out that it was the perfect domain, and it was perfect for what I wanted to do, because when I thought of a tavern is generally a friendly place where everybody knows your name. You come in, you talk about what's going on, you have some conversations. It's a friendly and mostly polite atmosphere, but every now and then you're going to have a bar fight, and you're going to have to clean up broken glass and broken tables, which we ended up doing because of GPL debates and some of the other stuff that was going on in the WordPress world. But by and large, WP Tavern was a huge success. And at one point, the who's who of the WordPress world was a member of the WP Tavern forums. And if you wanted to get in touch or interact with who's who of WordPress, you went to WP Tavern.
Wow. Let's rewind the story. Before you started getting paid to write, where did the skill of writing come from? And the passion as well?
Man, this goes way back. I got to tell you, so it's not like I took a journalism class. It's not like I took a writing class. I started a long time ago. Started with, there was a website way back in the day. It was called E2FX. And it's what we would today, it would be similar to WordPress.com, where you had your subdomain, and there's a lot of other people that were using that website. But one of the coolest things about E2FX was that it had a lot of community and networking aspects built in. So you could follow each other's blogs or sites. You could read each other's comments. There's this whole, it was like social networking, but via blogs. It was really cool, this network effect. And what I did was I just wrote about things that I was interested in, wrote my opinions about tech news that I was following. And it's just sort of a thing that I enjoyed doing. Like, I didn't take any courses or take any college courses and whatnot. I just wrote based on, I just wrote and published. That's pretty much what I did. So, there's no magic to it, but the more I did it, like anything, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And that's what happened with me. And look, I had no intentions of becoming a full-fledged journalist or becoming a reporter on certain things. When I looked at it as this is interesting to me, I have thoughts and views and opinions about it. I'm going to write those and publish them. And that's it. And if people comment on them, great. If people don't, that's fine. But I was just doing it for myself. And it turns out that particular skill set was valuable, and other people could benefit from it.
I think writing is a super skill. I mean, there's blogs and things, there's emails, there's copywriting on web pages. There's like creating an outline for a video or a script or a business plan, or it's just the ultimate skill. How do you, in your mind, see the difference between, I'm thinking about somebody who's like a subject matter expert in a topic, and they're thinking about, really kind of getting into writing and creating content. Of course, they want some SEO benefit, but how do you think about the difference between journalism and reporting versus opinion pieces versus SEO content? Like, I think people get a little overwhelmed of like, what do I write about and how do I write it?
So back in 2014 on my personal blog, jeffc.me, I wrote an article titled, I am a bad journalist. And in this article, I highlighted the fact that A, I never wanted to be called a journalist. B, I never called myself a journalist. C, I never considered myself a journalist. To me, the word journalist means somebody who really goes after the story. They do in-depth investigation. They double, triple check their sources. They do a lot of things that you would expect a journalist to do. And I never really did any of those things. I just took my views and opinions and maybe I would interview somebody, or I would ask somebody a question and use it as a quote. But then I would just publish a post, and I'm just a Joe Schmo, Joe the plumber, or whoever it is now that we're describing as the average person. I'm just taking something that I have an interest in, and then publishing my thoughts. And maybe I come back to those at some point later. Usually it was just for me, but then I ended up getting an audience, and it was an accidental audience. I wasn't out there searching for an audience. I wasn't out there saying, trying to get all these people to gravitate towards me. It was just me just writing stuff and hitting the publish button. And then sort of the magic happened where people started gravitating towards it like a nucleus. And then just more and more things started getting attracted to the core. And it just sort of worked out that way. And in my, I don't know if I should say career, but in all the times I've written and published stuff on the web, I've not once been concerned about SEO. Everyone out there is concerned about SEO, about titles, headings. How do you write this? How do you write that? Passive voice, this voice, anything about SEO. I threw SEO out the window, and guess what? It worked for me. It may not work for you. It may not work for somebody who is in a position of copywriting and writing articles for a business who is really looking to tap into that SEO and that audience. But everything I did was from a human perspective. So I wrote as a human for a human, thinking humans were going to read my stuff. And it turns out that that was a great strategy for me in the long run.
Yeah, it sounds like the traffic came from the story and your voice more than keyword optimization or anything like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. Keyword optimization, title optimization, how I wrote the stories. And I didn't care about anything about keywords or anything of that nature. I just said, look, I'm going to write this as a human would read it, and that's it. And if I get SEO traffic, great. If I don't, big deal. And it worked for me. But I will say that, and that's just from a personal writing and publishing standpoint, but I have worked for other businesses that really need that SEO because they need to stand out, because they're in a highly competitive atmosphere against all these other places online that are absolutely doing everything they can with SEO and keywords. And I got to tell you, that's where I struggle. I've always done things my own way. And when you have to write things in a way that benefits, the SEO bots and trying to get things to rank, I'm terrible at it.
Let's talk a little bit about just tactically. Writing is an art and a science. So first question, it's a little more tactical. When you're kind of in your flow, like how many articles a week would you do, or how would you set goals, or does one story take a full week, or is it like come out of you like super fast because you're inspired, or how do you think about volume of writing when you're in the flow?
So, and I think it also has to deal with what is it you're writing? Is it an in-depth topic? Is it something that's going to require a lot of research? Is it something that's not super time sensitive that you can spend a few weeks on or a few months researching? In my line of work, everything I pretty much wrote and published was, how can you say, sort of time-based or relevant, recent-based. So I used to cover a lot of news, a lot of things that were happening. And so I would end up just writing about what I knew. And then I would get in touch with some people to figure out answers to what I didn't know. And then, within a day or two, a lot of times a lot shorter than that, because I was dealing with public information that people already knew. And I would just compile that in a way, and then I would just publish the article. And in my mind, one of the things that I eventually learned is that when it comes to writing news posts, is that you don't have to have all aspects and everything correct. You don't have to have the whole story in one post. You can write about what you know, and the things you don't know you can mention, but you can always follow it up with another post when that information comes to light, if it ever does. So I kind of had that mindset of, well, let's compile what we know into a post, put it together, have some things in the back of my mind that we don't know, and let's see what happens. And then eventually they would either come out with another statement or the information would present itself and I would write up a follow-up post. But when I would get into the flow, and the flow is awesome. If nobody has ever been in the zone, boy, they need to make something that you can just trigger yourself to be in the zone because you feel unstoppable. And it's just a great feeling. But when I was in the zone, words would just flow from my head into the post editor like nothing. And I would put everything together. And before you know it, I had 700, 800 words written and it felt like nothing. And for me, an 800 to 1,000 word post is a lot when I'm dealing with news or something dealing with WordPress. So yeah, I could go through, I could publish 2 or 3 posts a day.
Wow.
Sometimes I could do, I would definitely do multiple items, multiple posts per week. But in the realm of WordPress, look, WordPress is a huge ecosystem. There are things happening all the time internally within the project and externally in terms of what people are building and using or the issues that they're experiencing. There's always something to write. And my job and sort of a skill I developed was, what is it that's going on out here that other people should know about? And that's something that you don't really, you can't really train yourself for it. It was sort of self-trained. And it turns out that a lot of the things I picked and choose that other people should know about were correct.
From the sort of journalistic reporting standpoint, let's say somebody's involved in a community, be it WordPress or the foodie scene or some health and fitness niche or some like parenting topic, whatever it is, there is a community around every topic. How did you think about like sourcing your like what to report on and where the story is? What advice would you have for somebody who's like, all right, I'm involved in X community. How do I find the story to write about?
Well, I started off with me on using something like Google Reader or Feedly and subscribing to a number of different websites that dealt with the topic that I was covering, that I was writing about. So subscribing to a lot of those websites, figuring out where the watering holes were for these people. So various forums, Slack instances, comment sections on particular websites, different social media, Twitter, Facebook, what have you, and trying to insert myself into those areas via commenting or sharing my opinions or something loosely based on what I wrote about, but putting it in there and just trying to get my name out there so people can see me in these watering holes. And then outside of that, I think my personality and my ability to be friendly with people and to listen and not to be so one-sided and to be great at engaging in a conversation, whether that be a debate or just hearing both sides. And I think that had a lot to do with people gravitating towards me and the things I wrote and just wanted to be part of my inner circle. I think attitude and how you approach people goes a long way towards building your vibe, your community.
You mentioned comments. I don't like this question, but I'll ask it this way. Are comments dead? And we all know that like social media has kind of changed things, but I mean, there's still blogs published today that have lots of comments on them. But how do we think about comments in 2024, 2025, if we have a website or we want to get engaged in our community on comments or whatever?
That's a great question. And to be honest, we've been asking our comments dead since like 2015 or before that. It's something that keeps up. I definitely think there are situations where it makes sense to have comments disabled depending on your goals and what you're trying to accomplish with your content. But I think back to how important comments were for me. And I remember publishing articles and waking up the next day or within hours, I'd get my first comment. And boy, it felt great. It's like, oh my God, somebody read this and took the time to comment on my article. That is pretty cool. And most of the time these days, that doesn't happen. It's spam, or somebody's saying things that you don't need to have published, or somebody's angry and upset. Comments used to be a great way to build community, to have to start your following, and it was sort of the social networking before social networking. And then you had your trackbacks and your pingbacks, which was really cool. And I don't know if it sure seems like comments are dead, but with the Fediverse and the different things that are being created to provide that social networking aspect, but to your website and then to your comments, I think they definitely can make a comeback.
Can you describe the Fediverse if somebody isn't familiar with that?
Well, that's a good question as well. I'm not quite sure of the technicalities of what the Fediverse is, but from my very basic understanding, it's a way to decentralizing decentralized materials. And maybe the people out there are cringing at me just saying that thing, but it's to bring a lot of disjointed things together, and so you don't have to be inside of a closed wall, or should say a walled garden. You could be open and treat your website as one place, and freely have access to other things and other content, other comments, and other places, and you can create that sort of network effect. And if somebody wants to throw a book at me right now because that's all wrong, please do. But I do know that the Fediverse is a great thing. There's a lot of work going on with the Fediverse. I think there's a WordPress plugin out there. It's pub something. Do you know of it?
I don't know the name.
Okay, there's some plugin that's being worked on out there to utilize the Fediverse, but there's great stuff ahead. And one of the coolest things, one of the best things about my early days of blogging is that the networking effect, where I could follow people, chime in on their blogs and all that stuff. And I'm hoping we could somehow recreate that, but not have to be tied to one particular service.
Speaking of networking and spam, Matt Medeiros is in the live stream comments, and he would like to know who was your favorite podcast co-host?
Okay, before I answer this, and because this came up the other day, Matt, you need to change your last name, because I and many other people always have to Google what your last name is in order to spell it correctly. All right. So, you do us all a favor in the WordPress world and change your last name to something that is easy to spell, so we don't have to Google it. As far as my favorite co-host, boy, that I had a lot of great times with John James Jacoby.
Oh, yeah.
He was even keeled. He was very smart. We had a lot of great in-depth conversations about WordPress things on the show, and he was one of my favorite guests. But I would say my favorite probably was Malcolm Peralty. And that's because for the longest time, he was the devil's advocate in the room. So when I would look at something very positive and this is great, he would be like, well, Jeff, what about this? And think about this way and that way. And I'm like, and it wasn't as if he was trying to be a downer. He was just coming at it from the opposite perspective. So while I was the optimist, a lot of times he was the pessimist. And you know what? For a show talking about WordPress, that was a perfect combination. And we had a lot of great conversations and interviews because of that dynamic that we had.
I like that insight. I don't know if you've ever listened to the All In podcast, but some of the hosts have very different views, and it's what makes it interesting.
Yes.
But there's friends. It's not like they're fighting or anything.
And quite honestly, if you're going to listen to a show where everybody has the same opinion and everybody's not challenging each other, it's boring. It's just, come on, somebody should challenge something. Somebody should say, no, well, think about it this way and think about it that way. That's where you get into the nitty gritty. That's where you get into the innovation and the different ideas and perspectives, and where you end up in a place that you may not ever thought you would be in.
Speaking of community, WordPress is really interesting to me because for well, I've obviously been here for a long time now, but in the beginning, I was just like on the outside of any kind of community aspect. There was this cool tool. I learned some tutorials on YouTube on how to use it. And it was several years into my journey where I really like started to discover like, oh, there's all these people on social media. Oh, there's these events I can go to. Oh, these some of these people are becoming real friends, either online, in person, hybrid, both. And it just kind of evolved. Um, how do you think about community in today's world? And I'm also asking in the context of if we want to get involved in a community, like whatever, like foodie niche, some health and fitness niche, or whatever, like how do we do community?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with, you know, publishing and getting out there and just being cognizant of the fact that there are other people out there. I mean, it's a big world. There's a lot of people, and there are going to be, you're almost guaranteed to have others out there with the same interests as you. And so, use your personality, use your ability to get out there to post and create this core, this nucleus, and in such a way to where it's inviting of others to join you on this journey and be like, hey, oh, you're into that too, and you're into that too. Yeah, all right. And now it starts. You got to start small, but you got to just do it. You got to start it, because if you don't, you have nothing. You have nothing to gravitate towards to. So, a lot less thinking and a lot more doing, or else, what you're not even accomplishing anything. But in the WordPress space, it's still very easy to start up a meetup or find a local meetup and to find people who are just getting into the software, despite it being 21 years old. There's still a lot of people just coming across it, and meetups are great. I participated and ran a meetup here in Northeast Ohio a number of years ago, and it was fantastic. You get to teach WordPress and figure out that WordPress is not as easy as you thought it was when you're teaching something, which was a revelation to me. And just getting to talk to these people and getting to know their experiences and their journeys of how they came to WordPress and whatnot. It's very cool on how these people just how they ended up in WordPress sometimes is really cool. But yeah, community is very important. And I will say that the WordPress community for me has been, look, Chris, over the years, when a lot of people have asked, what's your favorite thing about WordPress? One of the top answers is A, community, and B, all the plugins and the ecosystem and everything like that. But community, that's the word, meaning people who are welcoming each other in, people who are, who share their knowledge and their time with no cost associated, just on the basis of being friendly. That's the community part of WordPress that a lot of people love. And this community aspect of WordPress has helped me out tremendously on a personal basis. Throughout the years of 2019 through 2020 and 2021, I was unemployed. And there were many times where, my cell phone service was shut off, or my car was about to be repossessed, or certain bills, my mortgage wasn't going to be paid. And while I didn't feel comfortable doing it, I did reach out to the WordPress community and I said, hey, is there any chance you folks can lend me a hand and get me through some of these tough times? And they delivered. Time and time again, they delivered. And there are many other instances of people in the WordPress community who really needed some help. And collectively, we pulled through and got them through some of their toughest moments in their life up to that point. So community is very special. Nobody should ever take it for granted. And when you build it and they come, man, take very good care of it, because there's nothing like an awesome community that you're a part of. It's almost like a side family, to be honest. And WordCamps to me are like family reunions that I want to go to.
That's awesome. When it comes to community, WordPress, as an example, has kind of an in-person component with events and whatnot. But what would your advice be around, let's say somebody's just starting out, maybe there's an in-person aspect, but they don't know about it. Not necessarily with WordPress, but any community. Sometimes people like behave a little differently on the internet or whatever. So if somebody's like, either starting a community or trying to get involved in an online community, what are some things to think about that might be kind of counterintuitive compared to a more formal in-person community, like your local town, for example? Or things to
Hmm.
be challenges or things to be cautious about or, opportunities?
Let's see. I don't know. Maybe expand upon that, and we can have a conversation about that.
Um,
Maybe maybe you answer that question, and then I'll chime in.
so some challenges for me with I'm actually like an extreme introvert, right? Sometimes I come off as an extrovert because I make a lot of videos and do webinars and, have content out there. But, if I go to a town event, you're gonna see me on the edge of the event.
Okay.
I may not even go. Uh, but like in the online world, let's say being an introvert as an example, a lot of what I'm doing is like one-on-one interaction, this call included, which is my sweet spot as an introvert. Um, but when in online communities, sometimes they can be so massive. Like for example, there's this concept called Dunbar's number, which is that the human being through our evolution and whatnot is only designed to be able to maintain 145 relationships or something
Yeah.
like that. But like you mentioned WordPress, like I don't know, there's a lot of people using WordPress and maybe I'm just guessing like 20,000 people that are really active in the community aspect of it online. I can't keep up with 20,000 relationships.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge. Another challenge is sometimes people on the internet or through email or social media or whatever, like they tend to they're more trolls and let's say less of a filter, or sometimes you can get involved in a community online anonymously, which you can't really do in person. So that's a challenge. We talked about comments. Like it's good that there's comment moderation in WordPress so that you can just get the spam stuff out of there, as an example. Um, so that's a challenge. Sometimes big communities, there's language barriers. That's a challenge. Um, yeah, I'm just spitballing with you, but those are some of the challenges. And also, I think one of the big opportunities with an online community is in my second half of life, when I really kind of became an online person, a lot of the relationships I have, like where I've actually shook somebody's hand or given them a hug or something like that, it may have existed for years online and it was cool. We were friends then, we're friends now, but like there's more opportunity to start relationships online, which is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's many times where it's funny when I used to host the WordPress Weekly podcast back when I was doing WP Tavern. I used to go to a WordCamp, and believe it or not, I've never been this extroverted. Which if you look at my tweets online and you look at the way I project myself online, you'd think, boy, that guy is really into being around people. But I've been to WordCamps where I've stayed away and I don't introduce myself to anybody and I go into introvert mode. So it does occasionally happen to myself as well. Yeah, I project myself as an extrovert online, but in person, I could sometimes go into introvert mode. But it was funny at the WordCamp. I was speaking with somebody, and there was a woman that was 2 rows behind me, and she goes, "Excuse me, are you the host of the WordPress Weekly podcast?" And I said, "Yeah. How did you know?" And she goes, "Oh, I could tell that voice. That voice." I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah." So that was pretty cool. And yeah, and then we ended up with a just being able to talk and get myself out there and have her, if I wouldn't have been talking or if I wouldn't have been out there, throw myself out there into the community, into the in-person aspect, she probably never would have met me or had that opportunity to do so. But yeah, and these days, WordCamps in the WordPress community specifically, we have done a really good job of protecting each other for these situations where We have the code of conduct. We've got an incident response team that WordPress has. But by and large, we've done a great job of looking out for each other at these events. That's not to say that some incidents haven't still occurred, but this community does a great job of looking out for each other.
Let's talk about WordPress specifically. I first touched it in 2008, so I've been here for 16 years. And if I, in some way, it's not that I'm perplexed, but I'm like, how am I here? Like, I end up kind of being like, why have I become so obsessed with this tool and what we've done with it and like the community around it and everything? And why is publishing and e-commerce and online education so important to me? And it's sort of like a process of discovery. And I'm just looking into like, where does all this passion come from? But I'd ask you for your side on WordPress. You wouldn't have done all this like writing or gotten into the flow on writing or, invested so much time in the community and so on in the project without some passion. Where does the passion for that surrounds the software WordPress come from?
So I want to go back. I want to throw this back a little bit to comments because I want to share a funny story about comments. Comments are actually the reason I got started. I chose WordPress way back in the day. At that time, I was a big fan of Joomla. And for those who don't know, Joomla, yeah.
Guy before WordPress.
Yeah. The default theme in Joomla, I think, was Solar Flare. I think, if I recall, really unique layout with the top and the header part with the header image and the top left nav menu. See, it's burned into my brain. But Joomla at the time didn't have comments natively built in. You had to purchase a module or a commercial plugin or something to bolt it on. At that time, somehow, some way, I heard of something called WordPress, and it had commenting built in. So I tried it out and tried to implement the website I was building into WordPress. And I said, no way, I can't do this. WordPress is too difficult. Not even going to try it. Went back to Joomla. Ended up with, the same frustrations. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to give WordPress one more try. I'm going to take a deep breath. And once I discovered, once I read a tutorial and discovered that I could change how things worked by changing a number in the code, which was a parameter or an argument, and realizing that changing things in the behavior of either the plugin or WordPress itself was that easy, that's when I got the WordPress bug. That's when it got me. And plus I had comments built in natively. It was free. And so that's when I built the website on WordPress. And then I started writing about, and this was mostly to help me. I started writing and publishing everything I was learning about WordPress at the time. And it just so happens that a lot of other people in that time period were just discovering WordPress. And they too were also writing and publishing everything they were learning at the time as well. So I was part of this. There's a unique situation looking back on it of this large crowd of people learning WordPress kind of all at the same time, which lent itself to everybody helping each other and everybody looking for resources to level up their WordPress game at that time. And so going through all of that built up my passion for WordPress and being able to realize, wow, editing and being able to do these things in WordPress is very powerful, and it's so cool. And then having and interacting with all these different people at the same time, it just became a lifelong. Well, I wouldn't say lifelong because I'm still living and it's still there, but I still have the passion for WordPress and mostly the community and the people who build it to this day. And to this day, WordPress is 21 years old, and man, it's still there. I still have a love for it, and it's still there.
It sounds simple, but I'm just as passionate as I was when it first clicked for me. Similar to you, it was this idea that you could publish something and anybody anywhere in the world could look at that thing on their computer. Just kind of blew my mind that your voice can go everywhere. that the internet is. And that's still like amazing. And that's
Yeah,
just
I mean,
something we just overlook and like we're in it all day. So we don't think about it as much anymore. But that's amazing.
yeah, the main overarching goal of WordPress to democratize publishing is pretty great, and it's something worthy of getting behind. And trying to strive, be open and free to allow everybody to have their voice, to be able to have a tool that they can use to get their voice published online. It's a very noble and worthy cause, and it has been and still is.
That's awesome. Well, that's Jeff Chandler. You can find him at Jeff Rowe on Twitter. The O is a 0. Jeff, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your story, writing tips, community conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and Matt, change your last name.